You ever notice how every World War II documentary starts with the same exact thing? Black and white footage. A narrator with a voice like sandpaper says, "In the darkest hour of mankind." Then it's just tanks, bombs, and generals arguing over who gets credit for Poland. But no one ever talks about the other side of it. The absolute chaos factory of women who didn't just help the war effort, they rewired it. These weren't background characters sewing flags or handing out rations, and these were master spies, mathematicians, pilots, and scientists who casually made the Nazis look like a bunch of interns trying to fix a printer. Let's start with Nancy Wake, the woman who turned guerrilla warfare into a competitive sport. Nicknamed the White Mouse by the Gestapo because she was impossible to catch, Nancy was basically an Australian-born agent of chaos. She married a rich Frenchman, saw the Nazis roll into France, and immediately decided, yeah, not on my watch. So she joined the resistance, blew up bridges, derailed trains, smuggled downed Allied pilots, and made the Gestapo so mad they put a 5 million franc bounty on her head. That's right, 5 million. That's more than some generals earned in their entire careers. At one point, she was chased across southern France, barely escaped to Britain, and instead of retiring like a normal person, she went, let's do it again, but harder. So she trained with Britain's Special Operations Executive, aka Spies R Us, and parachuted back into France behind enemy lines. From there, she ran a 7,000-man Maquis army, sabotaged German supply lines, and at one point personally led a raid on a German garrison. Her record? Zero nonsense. When one of her men hesitated before a mission, she said, "You have to kill Germans. That's what you're here for. Direct. No corporate fluff, no management meetings, just pure clarity of purpose." And then for good measure, she once biked over 300 miles to deliver vital codes after her radio operator was captured. 300 miles. No food, no sleep, no backup. Just rage and leg power. The Gestapo never caught her. The White Mouse retired undefeated. Now imagine being the Germans and finding out that one of your biggest logistical nightmares was being run by an Australian woman with a bicycle. I guarantee someone got demoted for that. Then there's Lyudmila Pavlichenko, also known as Lady Death. You hear that nickname and think, oh, cool, propaganda name. Nope, she earned it. 309 confirmed kills, all while studying history at university before the war started. One day she was writing essays on medieval politics, the next she was putting 7.62mm rounds through helmets. She joined the Soviet army because she believed in defending her homeland, but also because she was terrifyingly good at shooting people who didn't. On her first day, the men in her unit tried to tell her to go back to the kitchen, so she picked up a rifle and outshot all of them in training. The commander just went, "Yep, you're staying." By the end of 1942, she was one of the most feared snipers on the Eastern Front. The Nazis even started broadcasting propaganda messages over loudspeakers begging her to defect. They'd literally shout, "Lyudmila, come to our side. We'll give you chocolate." She didn't even flinch. She later said, "They should have offered me more chocolate." And when she visited America after the war, reporters asked dumb stuff like, "Do you wear makeup on the front?" To which she replied, "I wear my uniform on the front. What do you wear when you kill fascists?" Mic drop. Lady Death wasn't just a soldier. She was a one-woman morale weapon. The kind of person you could show to both armies, and one of them would immediately quit. Now let's move to Virginia Hall, an American spy who ran entire resistance networks with one leg. She had a prosthetic she nicknamed Cuthbert, which is possibly the most British prosthetic name ever. Virginia worked for the British SOE and later the OSS, the predecessor to the CIA. Her codename was the Limping Lady. The Gestapo called her the most dangerous Allied spy in France, which is funny because her cover story was literally a milkmaid. She organized sabotage missions, parachute drops, courier networks, and entire resistance cells, all while dodging every Gestapo manhunt. She'd walk through occupied towns with a cane, pretending to be an old woman while carrying messages and weapons hidden in baskets of cheese. Eventually, the Gestapo realized they'd been outsmarted by someone with a wooden leg and collectively lost their minds. At one point, she fled over the Pyrenees Mountains on foot with Cuthbert during winter. She made it. When her superiors later asked if she was fine, she sent a message back saying, "Cuthbert is giving me trouble, but otherwise fine." Virginia was built like a tank, ran intelligence like a CEO, and still managed to make the Nazis look like clowns. Meanwhile, in the quiet halls of Bletchley Park, Joan Clark was doing math so advanced that it shortened the war by 2 years. She was one of the code breakers working with Alan Turing to crack the Enigma cipher. Now everyone knows Turing because he got a movie, but Joan was right there, co-inventing the logic that made it possible. She was paid half as much as the men because apparently discrimination doesn't take days off, but she still outperformed most of her team. Joan specialized in combinatorial logic and cipher theory, the kind of math that makes modern cryptographers cry. While the bombs fell, Joan and her team intercepted German messages, decrypted them, and passed them to Allied command. Her work prevented ambushes, rerouted convoys, and helped win the Battle of the Atlantic. Without Joan Clark, half the Allied ships at sea would have been torpedo practice. She didn't carry a gun or fly a plane, but she fought her war with equations. The British called it clerical work. Historians now call it the foundation of modern computing. Joan Clark didn't need bullets. She had algebra. Speaking of quiet legends, meet Noor Inayat Khan, Indian-British, fluent in multiple languages. A pacifist turned spy. She was a wireless operator for the SOE, the first woman ever sent into occupied France in that role. Her job: transmit coded messages from the French resistance back to London while hiding from German radio trackers who could triangulate her position in 20 minutes. Most operators lasted 6 weeks. Noor lasted 3 months, solo, after her entire network was arrested. She changed apartments constantly, carried her transmitter in a suitcase, and disguised herself as a children's nurse. When the Gestapo finally caught her, they tried to bribe her into switching sides. She refused every time. They confiscated her radio and tried to use it to send fake transmissions to London. The SOE saw through it immediately, because her writing style was too polite. Noor had such impeccable manners that even her fake captors couldn't copy her. Her courage wasn't loud, it wasn't flashy. It was the kind that makes your spine straighten when you read about it. She never broke, never betrayed a single person, and after the war, she received the George Cross for gallantry. If courage had a frequency, she transmitted it until the very end. Now let's talk about Jacqueline Cochran, the American pilot who looked at the sky and said, "Yeah, that's my office now." Before the war, she was already one of the top female pilots in the world, held speed records, altitude records, endurance records, you name it. When the war broke out, she convinced the U.S. Army Air Forces to let women fly military aircraft. The result was the Women Air Force Service Pilots, or WASPS. Over 1,000 women trained to ferry aircraft, test new models, and even tow live target drones for gunnery practice. You heard that right, they were literally used as moving bullseyes. "Hey, Brenda, can you fly this plane in a straight line while we shoot at it? Thanks." Cochran led the program like a commander, and a den mother rolled into one. By 1944, the WASPS had delivered over 12,000 aircraft and logged more than 60 million miles. They freed up male pilots for combat and proved, beyond any debate, that women could fly just as well, if not better. Cochran wasn't just a pilot, she was a force of nature with a clipboard. When someone asked if women could handle the stress of flying, she replied, "We don't faint when we get our hair waved, do we?" That's diplomacy, aviation edition. Her legacy laid the groundwork for women in the U.S. Air Force, and, indirectly, for every commercial pilot who's ever looked out a cockpit window and said, "Thanks, Jackie." And finally, there's Hedy Lamarr, the glamorous Hollywood actress who basically invented Wi-Fi in her spare time. While the rest of the world saw her as a movie star, Hedy saw the war as a tech problem. She and composer George Antheil developed a frequency-hopping communication system to prevent radio-controlled torpedoes from being jammed. The U.S. Navy ignored it at the time because, again, 1940s logic, she's too pretty to be right. But her design became the foundation for spread spectrum technology and the basis for Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, GPS, and pretty much every wireless thing you've used today. Let that sink in. The woman from Casablanca helped invent the internet. If there's ever been proof that brains and beauty can coexist, it's Hedy Lamarr. She didn't just act, she future-proofed humanity. When you step back, you realize all these women, Wake, Pavlichenko, Hall, Clark, Khan, Cochran, Lamarr, were operating in completely different arenas: espionage, science, aviation, engineering, resistance warfare, and math. And somehow, every single one of them left fingerprints on victory, and they weren't helping the war. They were the war, just in ways history forgot to footnote. When the bombs stopped falling and the smoke cleared, most of them didn't get medals or credit right away. Some went back to quiet lives. Others disappeared into the bureaucracy. But their work stuck around. In every decoded message, every flight log, every modern device pinging a satellite. They were the backbone of an era that pretended they didn't exist. So the next time someone says the men won the war, remember the spies with code names, the mathematicians with chalk dust on their sleeves, the pilots with goggles frozen to their faces, and the actresses rewriting physics equations on napkins. They didn't just support history, they rewrote it, quietly, brilliantly, and without asking permission. And that's the true story of the women who didn't wait to be heroes. They just got to work. While the world counted tanks, they were counting variables. While the generals planned invasions, they were planning everything else, and when history came calling, they answered with, "We already handled it." Because in World War II, courage didn't always wear a uniform. Sometimes it wore lipstick, carried a codebook, and broke the world's most dangerous machines, one calculation at a time.